My name is Ronnie, and at 32, I never expected my own sister to publicly humiliate me. Amanda and I were always competitive growing up, but what she did at our family reunion crossed a line nobody should ever cross. When she stood up and announced to everyone that I was bankrupt, I felt my world collapse. Little did she know, I had just secured a deal that would change everything between us. That lakefront property in Maine she had been obsessing over for years. I closed on it Saturday morning. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my sister, let me know where you are watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you have ever had a family member who could not keep a secret. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. Growing up in suburban Chicago, Amanda and I were raised in a household where achievement was not just encouraged, but expected. Our parents, both successful professionals, measured worth in accomplishments and financial milestones. Amanda, 3 years my senior, took this family value to heart more intensely than anyone else. From the earliest days I can remember, Amanda established herself as the standard bearer of success in our family. When I brought home an A on a test, she would casually mention her A+. When I made the basketball team, she would remind everyone about her 3 varsity letters. This pattern continued throughout our childhood, creating an invisible scoreboard that only she seemed to be keeping. Despite this underlying competition, we maintained what appeared to be a close relationship. Family photos show us smiling together at holidays, graduations, and vacations. To outsiders, we were the picture of sibling harmony. But beneath that carefully cultivated image was a current of tension that never fully dissipated. Our personalities developed in contrasting ways. I gravitated toward creativity, risk-taking, and thinking outside established systems. Meanwhile, Amanda became increasingly rigid, status-conscious, and obsessed with outward appearances. She chose a traditional path, pursuing a business degree from a prestigious university before securing a corporate job with all the expected trappings of success. I took a different route. After college, I turned down several corporate offers to join a struggling tech startup with an innovative approach to supply chain management. My parents and Amanda expressed concern about this decision, viewing it as unnecessarily risky. But I believed in the vision and wanted to build something meaningful rather than climb a predetermined ladder. Their concerns initially seemed justified when I lived on ramen noodles and worked 16-hour days while Amanda purchased her first luxury car and downtown condo. But 3 years later, when our startup secured major funding and my equities suddenly held significant value, the narrative shifted. Now, I was the financial success story at family gatherings. Amanda congratulated me publicly, but privately, I could see the comparison was eating at her. Our relationship entered a new phase of surface-level pleasantries, masking deeper resentment. We would meet for occasional dinners where she would probe for details about my finances, seeming to catalog my successes and setbacks with unusual interest. One consistent theme in our adult relationship was Amanda's materialism. She measured her worth through possessions and status symbols. Her condo was featured in a local design magazine. Her car was always the latest model. Her vacation photos were carefully curated to showcase luxury destinations. Among her aspirational acquisitions was a specific property she had become obsessed with over the past 5 years. It was a lakefront house in Maine that our family had rented one summer. An elegant 3-bedroom cottage with a private dock, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, and a stone fireplace that became the gathering spot each evening. Amanda had fallen in love with it, declaring it her dream home, and promising herself she would own it someday. Every family gathering since then included some mention of the main house. She tracked the property obsessively, following the real estate listings, and lamenting that it remained just beyond her financial reach. It became her symbol of ultimate success, the tangible proof she needed to validate her life choices. Last year, my financial situation hit an unexpected complication. The startup I had helped build was approaching an acquisition deal that would have multiplied my initial investment significantly. But 2 weeks before closing, our potential buyer pulled out, citing market uncertainties. This left us scrambling to secure alternative funding and temporarily froze all my assets tied to the company. For the first time in years, I faced genuine financial pressure. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to force some lifestyle adjustments while we regrouped. During this vulnerable period, I made what I now recognize as a critical mistake. During a dinner with Amanda, I confided in her about these challenges, sharing my concerns and uncertainties about the future. She responded with what seemed like genuine sisterly concern, offering support and keeping our conversation confidential. This rare moment of authentic connection made me believe that perhaps we had finally moved beyond our competitive past. I trusted her with information I had shared with very few others, including the detailed timeline for our company to recover and the specific financial arrangements I had made to weather this temporary setback. What I did not realize then was that Amanda was mentally filing away every detail, not out of concern, but as ammunition for future use. The main house, my financial situation, and our family dynamics were all pieces on a chessboard where she was planning several moves ahead. I was about to learn just how far my sister would go to maintain her position in our lifelong competition. The business setback hit harder than I initially admitted, even to myself. Our startup had been on the verge of a $30 million acquisition when the deal collapsed, leaving us with rapidly depleting runway and investor confidence shaken. As one of the founders with significant equity but relatively modest salary, my personal finances were deeply intertwined with the company's fate. For the first time since those early startup days, I found myself calculating expenses carefully and making difficult choices. I postponed the down payment on a new apartment, canceled a planned vacation, and even sold my car to increase my liquid assets. These were precautionary measures rather than desperate necessities, but the psychological impact was substantial. Late at night, doubts would creep in that I had never experienced before. Had I made a terrible mistake turning down those safe corporate jobs years ago? Was Amanda's conservative approach to career and finances actually the wiser path? The worst moments came when I imagined facing my family, particularly Amanda, and admitting that my entrepreneurial journey had ended in failure. It was during one of these vulnerable evenings that Amanda called to check in. Something about her timing seemed almost uncanny, as if she could sense my moment of weakness. Over dinner at her immaculately decorated condo, the conversation turned to my situation, and I found myself revealing details I had planned to keep private. I explained the failed acquisition, the cash flow challenges, and my contingency plans. Amanda listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that seemed motivated by genuine concern. When I mentioned potentially selling some of my equity at a discount to cover immediate expenses, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand reassuringly. "This stays between us," she promised. "Family supports each other through hard times. I know you will bounce back from this." Her response was so validating that I shared even more, including specific figures and timelines. I explained that while things looked dire on paper, I was working with a financial advisor on a recovery strategy. We were pursuing alternative investors and had a promising lead that could potentially save the company within 3 months. The conversation felt like a breakthrough in our relationship, a moment of authentic connection, untainted by competition. "Just please keep this private," I asked her. "Mom and Dad would worry unnecessarily. And you know how word spreads through the extended family." "Of course," Amanda assured me. "Your financial situation is your business to share when you are ready." As I left her condo that night, I felt lighter, believing I had a genuine ally in my corner. What I did not recognize were the subtle signs that should have alarmed me. The excessive details in her questions, her unusual interest in specific timelines, and the way she steered the conversation toward the upcoming family reunion, scheduled for exactly when my financial situation would be at its most precarious. The weeks following our dinner conversation brought unexpected positive developments. Through marathon negotiation sessions and sleepless nights, our executive team secured interest from a new investor group. While smaller than our original acquisition offer, this investment would provide the capital needed to continue operations and potentially position us for an even better exit in the future. I had just signed the preliminary agreement when Amanda began increasing her contact frequency. She called every few days with seemingly casual questions that inevitably turned toward my financial situation. How was the investor search going? Had I sold any assets yet? Was I planning to attend the family reunion despite my circumstances? These conversations carried an undercurrent I could not quite identify at the time. There was concern in her voice, but something else too. I mistook it for the protective instinct of an older sister, never suspecting it might actually be calculation. The annual family reunion had been a tradition since our grandparents established it 30 years ago. Hosted at our parents' lakefront property in Wisconsin, it brought together aunts, uncles, cousins, and even distant relatives for a weekend of connection and reminiscing. This year would be particularly significant, as our grandparents were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. As the reunion approached, I debated whether to attend. The new investment deal was progressing, but not yet finalized. My financial situation remained precarious on paper, though with light clearly visible at the end of the tunnel. Ultimately, I decided that missing this milestone celebration would raise more questions than simply attending and deflecting any inquiries about work. The week before the reunion, while researching some investment options online, I made an accidental discovery that should have warned me about what was coming. When Amanda had borrowed my laptop during a recent visit, she had apparently forgotten to log out of her email account. Among her open tabs was a saved search for real estate listings in Maine, specifically filtering for properties matching the description of her dream lakefront home. The listing showed the property had recently been reduced in price, with a note indicating the owners were motivated to sell quickly. Another open tab showed a mortgage pre-approval application. The pieces should have clicked together then, but I was too preoccupied with my own situation to recognize the significance of what I had seen. I closed her email without thinking much about it, chalking it up to Amanda's ongoing obsession with the property, rather than connecting it to our recent conversations and her unusual interest in my financial timeline. It was a connection I would only make in hindsight, after everything had fallen apart and come together again in ways I never could have anticipated. The family reunion began like any other, with cars pulling into the long gravel driveway of my parents' lakefront property, arms full of potluck dishes and overnight bags. The sprawling yard quickly filled with familiar faces from across the country, from elderly great-aunts to cousins, babies I had never met before. Despite my financial concerns, I felt a sense of comfort in these familiar traditions. I arrived early to help my parents set up, arranging folding tables on the lawn and stringing lights around the deck for the evening gathering. Amanda arrived precisely on time, stepping out of her luxury SUV in designer sunglasses and carrying a gourmet dessert in an expensive serving dish. She hugged me with unusual warmth, holding the embrace just a beat too long. "How are you holding up?" she whispered in my ear, loud enough that our cousin walking past could hear. "Just let me know if you need anything, okay?" Throughout the afternoon, I noticed Amanda engaged in hushed conversations that would abruptly end when I approached. She moved from one family group to another, spending time with relatives she normally ignored at these gatherings. Several times I caught concerned glances directed my way after she had spoken to someone. An uneasy feeling began to form in my stomach, but I dismissed it as paranoia resulting from my recent stress. The highlight of our family reunions was always the Saturday evening dinner, when all 30-plus members of the extended family gathered around a collection of tables on the back lawn overlooking the lake. This year was particularly special, with a champagne toast planned for our grandparents' anniversary and speeches prepared by various family members. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, we all took our seats. I found myself positioned directly across from Amanda, who kept giving me small, sympathetic smiles that increasingly felt patronizing rather than supportive. The meal progressed through several courses, with conversation flowing easily among family members catching up on each other's lives. When dessert was served, my father stood to propose the first toast to my grandparents. Other relatives followed with their own tributes and memories. The mood was nostalgic and celebratory, exactly as these gatherings should be. Then, just as I thought the formal portion of the evening was concluding, Amanda unexpectedly rose to her feet, champagne glass in hand. "I would like to say something as well," she began, her voice carrying a theatrical quality I recognized from her college drama days. "Family is about being there for each other, through good times and bad, about supporting each other when life throws challenges our way." The table fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Amanda. I felt a flicker of apprehension, but still did not anticipate what was coming, which is why I think it is important that we all know what Ronnie has been going through, she continued, turning to look directly at me with what appeared to be practiced concern. "He has been trying to handle it alone, but I do not think that is what family is for." My breath caught in my throat as understanding dawned. She would not actually do this. Not here. Not now. Ronnie has been struggling financially for months now, Amanda announced to the entire assembled family. His company is failing, and he is facing bankruptcy. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I felt as though I had been struck. Around the table, expressions shifted from confusion to shock to pity. My grandmother clutched her chest. My father frowned deeply. Cousins exchanged glances, but Amanda was not finished. With meticulous detail, she began sharing the specific information I had confided in her during our private dinner. The exact amount of my cash reserves, the timeline of the failed acquisition, even my contingency plans involving selling personal assets. Each word was a fresh betrayal, revealing that our entire conversation had been cataloged for this very moment. "I am telling you all this because Ronnie needs our support right now," she concluded, her voice dripping with false compassion. "Not just emotional support, but perhaps financial assistance as well. This is what family does in times of crisis." The silence that followed was deafening. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me, filled with a mixture of pity, concern, and uncomfortable curiosity. My face burned with humiliation. The financial challenges I had been managing privately had been transformed into a public spectacle of failure, painted in the most desperate terms possible. What made the betrayal even more cutting was the timing. Had Amanda waited just one more week, the new investment deal would have been finalized, rendering her dramatic announcement completely false. Whether this timing was coincidental or calculated, I could not be sure. But the effect was devastating either way. The remainder of the dinner dissolved into an awkward mess of relatives approaching to offer sympathy and unsolicited advice. Uncle Tom offered to loan me money. Aunt Sarah suggested I move back home with my parents to save on rent. My cousin Patrick helpfully mentioned an entry-level position open at his insurance company. With each well-intentioned suggestion, my humiliation deepened. Through it all, Amanda maintained her position as the concerned sister, the family member brave enough to bring this crisis to light. For my own good, she fielded questions about my situation with practiced responses that somehow always centered her own generosity and foresight. The contrast between her public persona and the reality of her betrayal made me physically nauseous. When I finally managed to extract myself from the gathering, claiming a headache that was actually all too real, Amanda followed me to the guest house where I was staying. "You had no right," I said when we were alone, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "That was private information. I shared with you in confidence. I did it because I care about you," she replied, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "You cannot handle this alone, and the family deserves to know when one of us is in trouble." "This was never your information to share," I countered. "You deliberately humiliated me in front of everyone." A flicker of something crossed her face then, a momentary crack in her compassionate facade. "Sometimes people need to face reality, Ronnie. You took risks with that startup that I warned you about years ago. The family deserves to know that your choices have consequences." In that moment, I understood completely. This had never been about concern for my welfare. It was about Amanda reasserting her position in our lifelong competition. With my apparent financial downfall, she could reclaim her status as the successful sibling, the one who had chosen the safer, smarter path. My humiliation was simply a vehicle for her validation. As she left, she turned with one parting shot, disguised as sisterly advice. "You should really consider moving back home until this blows over. I know it's hard to admit when you have failed, but there is no shame in starting over." But what Amanda did not know as she walked away, satisfied with her victory, was that her announcement was not just a betrayal of trust. It was fundamentally incorrect. And more importantly, she had no idea what I had discovered about her plans for the main property, or what I had already set in motion that would shift the balance between us in ways she could never anticipate. I left the reunion at dawn the following morning, unable to face another day of pitying glances and well-meaning but humiliating offers of help. The 5-hour drive back to my apartment provided ample time to process both the betrayal and my growing anger. By the time I reached the city, that anger had crystallized into something more focused and controlled, a determination to correct the false narrative Amanda had so publicly constructed. The truth about my financial situation was significantly different from what Amanda had portrayed. Yes, the company had faced a serious setback when our acquisition fell through. Yes, I had experienced a temporary cash flow issue while our assets were tied up in the transition. But bankruptcy? Not even close. What Amanda either failed to understand or deliberately misrepresented was that my company had been in advanced negotiations with a new investor group for weeks. The morning before the reunion, just as families were beginning to arrive at the lake house, I had received confirmation that the term sheet was approved. The investment would not only solve our immediate cash concerns, but potentially position us for greater growth than the original acquisition would have allowed. I had planned to keep this information private until the final documents were signed, still cautious after our previous deal had fallen through. The formal closing was scheduled for the following week, which meant Amanda's dramatic announcement of my financial ruin came exactly 7 days before I would become more financially secure than I had ever been. The irony of this timing might have been amusing under different circumstances. Now, it simply fueled my resolve to address the humiliation I had suffered. But how? A simple correction of facts seemed insufficient given the public nature of her betrayal. Then I remembered the open tabs on my laptop that I had discovered the week before. Amanda had been monitoring the main property she had coveted for years. The price reduction and her mortgage application suggested she was finally preparing to make her move. This lakefront house had been her dream for so long that it had become something of a family joke. How she would mention it at every gathering, showing photos and describing how she would decorate each room when it finally became hers. A quick check of the real estate listing confirmed the property was still available, though now marked as having high interest from multiple parties. Without allowing myself to fully consider the implications, I called the listing agent directly. "I am interested in the lakefront property on Silver Lake," I said when she answered. "I understand there may be other interested buyers, but I am prepared to make an all-cash offer immediately." The agent, hearing the magic words "all cash," became significantly more attentive. She confirmed there were indeed other interested parties, including one who had scheduled a viewing for the following weekend and seemed very serious about making an offer. That timeline confirmed my suspicion. Amanda was planning to view the property after the reunion, likely intending to make an offer with the mortgage pre-approval she had already secured. The synchronicity of her announcement of my financial ruin and her plans to finally acquire her dream home suddenly seemed less coincidental. "I would like to see the property tomorrow," I told the agent. "And if it meets my expectations, I am prepared to close as quickly as the sellers can arrange." The next morning, I drove 3 hours to Maine to view the house. It was exactly as Amanda had described countless times over the years. The stone fireplace, the wall of windows overlooking the lake, the private dock extending into the clear water. Standing in the great room, I could almost hear her voice describing where each piece of furniture would go, how the light would look in different seasons. I made an offer on the spot. 15%. Above asking price with the condition of absolute confidentiality from all parties. The selling agent, seeing the opportunity for a substantial commission on a quick, over-asking sale, eagerly agreed to my terms. I emphasized repeatedly that the sale should not be publicly recorded or announced until absolutely necessary, citing privacy concerns related to my business. There is one more unusual request, I added. I need this transaction to close by Saturday morning at the latest. I realize that is an extremely accelerated timeline, but I am willing to pay additional fees to the title company, attorneys, and anyone else involved to make it happen. The agent looked dubious. That is very unusual, Mr. Collins. Real estate transactions typically take weeks, even with cash offers. I understand. But this is non-negotiable for me, I replied. Money can solve many logistical problems. Please find out what it would take to make this happen. A flurry of phone calls, emails, and wire transfers followed. The sellers, motivated by my generous offer and cash payment, agreed to the accelerated timeline. The title company, incentivized by substantial additional fees, committed to expedited processing. By Wednesday, we had cleared most of the hurdles. By Friday afternoon, we were prepared for the final signing. Throughout this whirlwind process, I maintained absolute secrecy. I took calls in private, used my personal email rather than company accounts, and told no one, not even my closest friends, what I was doing. The only people aware of the transaction were the necessary legal and real estate professionals, all bound by confidentiality agreements. Saturday morning found me sitting in a law office in Portland, Maine, signing the final documents that would transfer ownership of Amanda's dream house to my name. As I signed page after page, I thought about the family dinner my parents had arranged for that evening, ostensibly to support me through this difficult time following Amanda's announcement. I had initially declined the invitation, still raw from the reunion humiliation. But as my plan had taken shape through the week, I recognized the dinner as the perfect setting for what needed to happen next. I called my mother back and told her I would attend after all. The property keys were handed to me at 11:17 a.m. on Saturday. I took a single photo of myself holding them in front of the house, making sure the distinctive blue door and lakefront view were clearly visible in the background. Then, I began the drive back to the city, the deed and keys secure in my briefcase, ready for the evening ahead. What Amanda did not know, as she presumably prepared for her property viewing the following day, was that her dream house now belonged to me. The realization of how completely the tables had turned brought not joy but a complicated satisfaction. This was not about revenge for its own sake, but about correcting a fundamental imbalance, about standing up to years of competitive undermining that had finally crossed into outright betrayal. As I drove, I considered exactly how and when to reveal what I had done. The approach needed to be perfect, neither prematurely defensive nor unnecessarily cruel. By the time I reached the city limits, I had formulated a plan that would allow Amanda's own actions to create the moment of revelation. All I needed to do was wait for her to set the stage herself, something I knew her pride would inevitably compel her to do. The weeks following the family reunion were a strange limbo of strained relationships and careful navigation. Word of my supposed financial ruin spread through the extended family network like wildfire. Cousins I spoke with once a year suddenly called to check in. Distant relatives sent links to job postings. My parents left increasingly concerned voicemails, asking if I needed to move back to their house temporarily. Through it all, Amanda maintained her performance as the concerned older sister. She called every other day with a transparency that would have been comical if it was not so infuriating. Each conversation was a masterclass in condescension, disguised as support. "Have you thought more about downsizing your apartment?" she would ask. "I know someone who might take over your lease if you decide to move somewhere more affordable." Or, "I organized some of my professional clothes that might fit you for interviews." First impressions are so important when you are starting over. I responded to these offers with non-committal thanks, neither confirming nor challenging the bankruptcy narrative she had created. Each conversation required extraordinary restraint, biting back the truth that my company had not only secured the new investment, but was now experiencing unexpected growth as a result of the partnership. This restraint served a strategic purpose. The longer Amanda believed in her version of events, the more confidently she would proceed with her own plans. Meanwhile, I monitored the real estate listing for the main property, watching as it changed from active to pending, and finally, to sold within a week of my purchase. The public record would not show the new owner information for several more weeks, by which time my plan would have already played out. Through subtle questioning of family members, I learned that Amanda had been uncharacteristically jubilant in recent days, hinting at exciting news she would share soon. My mother mentioned that Amanda had requested a special family dinner, insisting that everyone be present for an important announcement. "She was very specific that you should be there too, Ronnie," my mother said during one of her daily check-in calls. "I think she wants to offer you some kind of help. She mentioned something about a generous gesture that might give you a fresh start." The dinner was scheduled for Saturday evening at my parents' house, exactly 2 weeks after the reunion where Amanda had revealed my supposed bankruptcy. This timing could not have been more perfect if I had arranged it myself. It gave me the ideal setting to complete what I had set in motion with the property purchase. As the day approached, I prepared carefully. I had the property deed and keys secured in a simple blue envelope, the same shade as the distinctive front door of the main house. I selected my outfit thoughtfully, choosing to dress well but not ostentatiously, avoiding any hint of my improved financial situation. The final touch was loading several carefully selected photos of the property onto my phone, easily accessible but not immediately visible. When Saturday evening arrived, I drove to my parents' suburban home with a strange calm. The anger that had initially fueled my actions had transformed into something more measured, a quiet determination to restore balance rather than seek pure revenge. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Amanda's car already there, her vanity license plate AMDA, one prominently displayed as always. Inside, the atmosphere was awkwardly stilted. My father greeted me with a hug that lingered too long. The physical manifestation of concern he struggled to verbalize. My mother fluttered around the kitchen, preparing far too much food for just the 4 of us. Her way of showing support without addressing the situation directly. Amanda sat at the kitchen island, looking immaculate, as always in a designer outfit that somehow managed to be both casual and clearly expensive. When she saw me, she stood and approached with open arms, embracing me in full view of our parents. "You look good," she said, examining me with barely concealed surprise. "I was worried you might not be taking care of yourself." "I am managing," I replied neutrally, offering no further details. Throughout the pre-dinner drinks and appetizers, Amanda dominated the conversation with stories of her recent work successes and social events, each anecdote carefully constructed to highlight her stability and achievement. The subtext was clear. While I was floundering, she was thriving. Our parents nodded and smiled, though I could see the strain in their expressions as they glanced between us. As we moved to the dining room, Amanda strategically placed a folder of what appeared to be real estate listings on the side table, positioned to be noticeable, but not overtly displayed. When my mother asked about it, Amanda gave a practiced, modest smile. "Just some properties I have been looking at. Nothing definite yet. I will share more over dinner." The meal progressed with uncomfortable attempts at normal conversation. My father discussed a home renovation project. My mother described her garden plans for the coming season. I answered direct questions with minimal information, neither confirming nor denying anything about my financial situation. And Amanda watched me with barely concealed anticipation, clearly waiting for the perfect moment to make her announcement. That moment came as my mother served dessert, a situation so reminiscent of the reunion dinner that it could not have been coincidental. Amanda cleared her throat delicately, drawing everyone's attention just as she had 2 weeks prior. "I actually have some exciting news to share," she began, reaching for the folder she had positioned earlier. "I know we have all been concerned about Ronnie's situation, and I have been thinking about how I might help in a meaningful way." She paused dramatically, looking around to ensure she had everyone's full attention. My parents leaned forward expectantly. I maintained a neutral expression, waiting. "You all know I have been saving for years toward buying that lakefront property in Maine," she continued. "Well, I have finally decided to make it happen." She opened the folder to reveal printouts of the listing, passing them around the table. The photos showed the same stone fireplace, wall of windows, and lake view that I now legally owned. "I have an appointment to see it tomorrow," Amanda explained, unable to contain her excitement. "But the agent has assured me it is exactly as it appears in the photos. If all goes well, I will be making an offer immediately." My mother gasped appropriately. "Oh, Amanda, your dream house. This is wonderful news." My father nodded approvingly. "Smart investment. Waterfront property only appreciates." Amanda was glowing with the attention, but I noticed her gaze repeatedly shifting to me, waiting for my reaction. The subtext was clear. While I was losing everything, she was achieving her long-held dream. The contrast could not have been more pointed. The timing just seemed right, she added, with emphasis that left no doubt about her meaning. Sometimes life reminds us that the steady, careful approach pays off in the end. She turned directly to me then, her expression a perfect blend of sympathy and superiority. "And Ronnie, I was thinking once I have settled in, perhaps you could come stay for a while. The change of scenery might help you clear your head and figure out your next steps. The guest room has a lovely view of the lake." The condescension in her offer was palpable. This was not generosity, but a victory lap, a chance to permanently establish her position as the successful sibling, while I played the role of grateful recipient of her charity. The narrative she was creating would define our relationship for years to come, if left unchallenged. The moment had arrived. As my parents murmured appreciatively about Amanda's generosity, I reached for my phone with deliberate casualness. Everything that followed would depend on timing and delivery. The stage was set, the players in position, and the script about to take an unexpected turn that only I could see coming. "I think that property will look beautiful in the fall," I said conversationally, unlocking my phone. The changing leaves reflecting on the lake, the stone fireplace going in the evenings. Amanda nodded enthusiastically, pleased that I was engaging with her announcement. "Exactly. I have been picturing myself there through all 4 seasons. The listing mentions a stone path that leads down to a private beach area. I am already planning to add an outdoor fire pit there for summer evenings." She continued describing her plans for the property in exquisite detail, from the furniture arrangements to the color schemes for each room. Her excitement was genuine and all-consuming. Our parents watched with fond smiles as Amanda pulled out additional photos from her folder, laying them across the dining table like treasured artifacts. "The master bedroom has these incredible windows," she said, pointing to one of the images. "I will be able to see the sunrise over the lake without even getting out of bed." "It sounds perfect for you," I replied, scrolling casually through my phone. "Have you seen the back deck? The listing photos do not really do it justice." Amanda looked up with slight confusion. "There were only a couple of shots of the deck in the listing. How would you know?" I shrugged lightly. "Just a guess. But actually, I do have some better photos if you would like to see them." Without waiting for her response, I turned my phone around and slid it across the table. The screen displayed a crystal-clear image of the same house from a different angle, showing the expansive back deck with the lake stretching out beyond it. The photo was clearly recent, with summer flowers in bloom along the railing. Amanda stared at the image, her brow furrowing slightly. "Where did you get this?" "This is not in the listing photos I have seen. I took it myself," I said quietly. Saturday morning. For a moment, the meaning of my words did not register. Amanda continued looking at the photo, then swiped to see the next one. It showed the interior of the great room, the stone fireplace she had just been describing in such detail. The next photo showed the kitchen with its large island and lakeview windows. The next showed the master bedroom she had just mentioned. Slowly, confusion transformed into disbelief on her face. She looked up at me, then back at the phone, then up again. "I do not understand," she said, her voice suddenly less confident. "How did you get these photos?" Like I said, I took them myself when I was there on Saturday. "But why would you?" she began, then stopped as understanding started to dawn. "Why would they show you the property when I had already scheduled a viewing?" The moment had arrived. I reached for my briefcase beside my chair and withdrew the blue envelope, placing it on the table between us. For a few seconds, no one moved. Our parents watched in confused silence, unable to follow the sudden shift in the conversation. "They showed me the property," I said evenly, "because I made an offer on it last week. An all-cash offer, significantly above asking price." The color drained from Amanda's face. She stared at the envelope, as if it might bite her. "That is not possible. You cannot afford." "The offer was accepted immediately," I continued, maintaining the same calm tone. "We expedited the closing process, and I signed the final paperwork Saturday morning. At exactly 11:17 a.m., this property legally became mine." I opened the envelope and slid the deed across the table, along with the house keys attached to a small blue keychain matching the front door color. The legal document lay there between us, my name clearly listed as the new owner of the property she had coveted for years. Amanda stared at the deed in stunned silence, her mouth slightly open. She reached for it with trembling fingers, examining the official stamps and signatures as if searching for evidence it was counterfeit. Finding none, she looked up at me, her expression a complex mixture of shock, confusion, and the first flickers of anger. "This is impossible," she whispered. "You told me you were broke. You said the company was failing, that you might have to declare bankruptcy." "No," I corrected her gently. "I never said those things." "You did. At the family reunion. In front of everyone." The implication hung in the air. Our parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly understanding they were witnessing something much more complicated than they had realized. "But your company," Amanda insisted, her voice rising slightly. "The failed acquisition deal was replaced by a new investment agreement," I finished for her, "which was finalized the week after the reunion. The company is not only stable, but growing faster than ever." "You let me believe," she began, then stopped, realizing the precariousness of her position. She could hardly accuse me of deception when she had been the one to announce information that was not hers to share. "I let you believe what you chose to believe," I replied. "Just as you chose to share private information I had confided in you. Information that was both personal and ultimately incorrect." Our parents were looking between us with growing concern, clearly struggling to follow the rapidly unfolding situation. "Would someone please explain what is happening here?" my father finally asked. Before I could respond, Amanda made a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. "Ronnie is just upset because I told everyone about his financial problems. I was only trying to help, and now he has done something reckless to try to prove me wrong." "Actually," I said, addressing our parents directly, "Amanda shared confidential information I had trusted her with, deliberately mischaracterizing a temporary business setback as complete financial ruin. She announced this to our entire extended family, without my knowledge or consent. timing it precisely when it would cause maximum embarrassment. I gestured toward the deed still lying on the table. As for this property, it was a sound investment made with proceeds from our new funding round. The fact that it happens to be the house Amanda has been obsessing over for years is merely an interesting coincidence. The last statement was delivered with just enough emphasis to make it clear it was anything but coincidental. Amanda's face flushed with color as she finally grasped the full implications of what had happened. "You did this to spite me," she accused, her voice shaking. "You do not even want this house. You just bought it, so I could not have it." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps I simply recognized a good investment opportunity. Waterfront property only appreciates. Right, Dad?" My father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The tension in the room was palpable. Amanda turned to our parents, seeking allies. "Do you see how vindictive he is being? I made one mistake, trying to help him. And this is how he responds." My mother, always the peacemaker, attempted to intervene. "I am sure there has just been a misunderstanding between you two. Maybe we should all take a moment to calm down." "There is no misunderstanding," I said firmly. "Amanda deliberately humiliated me in front of our entire family, using private information I had shared in confidence. Information that, as it turns out, was not even accurate." I turned back to Amanda, whose expression had shifted from shock to anger to something approaching calculation. "You have been competing with me our entire lives, always needing to be seen as more successful, more stable, more accomplished. When you thought I was failing, you could not wait to announce it to everyone. To position yourself as both the concerned sister and the superior sibling in one masterful performance." Amanda stood abruptly, gathering her folder of now useless property listings. "I do not have to listen to this. You have clearly let success go to your head if you think this kind of petty revenge is appropriate." As she moved to leave, I called after her with one final question. "Would you still like to use the guest room, Amanda? As you said, it does have a lovely view of the lake." She froze momentarily, then continued toward the door without responding or looking back. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the suddenly silent house, followed by the aggressive rev of her car engine as she pulled out of the driveway. My parents sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. I calmly collected the deed and keys, returning them to the blue envelope. "I apologize for the drama," I told them quietly. "But there are some things that needed to be addressed." As I drove home that night, I felt not the triumphant satisfaction I had anticipated, but something more complex. A weight had been lifted, certainly, but there was also recognition that something fundamental had changed in my family that could never be fully restored. The question now was, what would rise in its place? The days following the dinner unfolded with unexpected developments. My phone, which had been filled with messages of concern and offers of help after the reunion, now buzzed with a different type of notification. Family members were reaching out, but the tone had shifted dramatically. "I just heard what happened with Amanda," my cousin Rachel texted. "I should have known her story about your finances seemed off. I am sorry I believed her without talking to you first." Similar messages arrived from aunts, uncles, and other cousins, each expressing varying degrees of embarrassment for having accepted Amanda's narrative without question. It became clear that word of our confrontation had spread through the family grapevine almost as quickly as the original bankruptcy story. My parents called the morning after the dinner, asking if I would come over to talk. When I arrived, I found them sitting in the kitchen, coffee cups in hand, expressions serious but open. "We owe you an apology," my father began, uncharacteristically direct about emotional matters. "We should have spoken to you directly about what Amanda said at the reunion, rather than just accepting it and acting on assumptions." My mother nodded in agreement. "We have been thinking about it, and this pattern with you two goes back much further than we have acknowledged. We always knew there was competition, but we told ourselves it was normal sibling rivalry. Maybe we should have addressed it differently. This acknowledgement was unexpected and surprisingly healing. We spent hours talking that afternoon, discussing family dynamics I had never verbalized before. I explained how Amanda's constant competition had shaped our relationship from childhood, how her need to position herself as the successful sibling had created an ongoing tension that finally exploded with her public announcement. I probably did not handle it in the most mature way, I admitted. Buying the house was an emotional decision, even if it also makes financial sense. Sometimes emotions need to be part of the equation, my father said, surprising me with his understanding. You stood up for yourself. That is not something to apologize for. 3 days after the dinner, Amanda finally broke her silence with a text message that was brief but loaded. We need to talk. Not at Mom and Dad's. Neutral ground. We met at a coffee shop downtown, selecting an outdoor table that offered both privacy and the safety of a public setting. Amanda arrived looking less polished than usual, her expression guarded as she took the seat across from me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. She stirred her untouched coffee while I waited, determined to let her begin this conversation. What you did was petty and vindictive, she finally said, her voice low but intense. What I did was respond to a public betrayal with a private purchase, I countered. I did not announce anything to the family. I only revealed the truth when you were about to make another grand pronouncement based on assumptions about my situation. She looked away, jaw tightening. I thought I was helping. No, you did not, I said calmly. You thought you were positioning yourself as the successful, stable sibling, while portraying me as the failure. You have been doing some version of this our entire lives, Amanda. This was just the most public and damaging iteration. To my surprise, she did not immediately deny this assessment. Instead, she stared into her coffee cup as if it might contain a rebuttal I could not counter. What are you going to do with the house? She finally asked. You never even liked Maine. It was the question I had been expecting, the one that would determine where we went from here. I had considered various responses during sleepless nights, weighing options that ranged from selling the property immediately to keeping it indefinitely, just to know she could never have it. I am not sure yet, I answered truthfully. It is a good investment regardless, but I am open to discussing options that might work for both of us. She looked up sharply. What does that mean? It means I am willing to consider arrangements that acknowledge both the financial and emotional aspects of this situation. Perhaps a structured purchase over time, or a rental agreement with an option to buy. I am not interested in being vindictive for its own sake, Amanda. I just needed to correct the imbalance between us. This offer, which I had not planned to make, surprised us both. It opened a conversation that lasted hours, moving beyond the house to deeper issues that had defined our relationship for decades. For perhaps the first time, we spoke honestly about the competition that had always existed between us, its origins, and its costs. I always felt I had to be perfect, Amanda admitted after her second coffee. You seemed to succeed so effortlessly, taking risks that somehow always paid off. I worked so hard for everything, while you just seemed to float through life, collecting wins. That was never how it felt from my perspective, I told her. I saw you as the one who had it all figured out, always confident in your choices, while I was just guessing and getting lucky. This exchange marked the beginning of a difficult but necessary rebuilding process. Over subsequent weeks, we established new boundaries and expectations. The property in Maine became not a symbol of victory or defeat, but a complicated shared asset that required ongoing communication to manage. The wider family dynamics also shifted. At the next gathering, a cousin's wedding 2 months later, the bankruptcy story had been fully corrected. Amanda and I arrived separately but presented a united front when questions arose, having agreed on a simplified narrative that preserved dignity for both of us. The most significant healing, however, came internally. The anger that had driven my property purchase gradually transformed into something more constructive. I recognized that while Amanda's betrayal had been genuine and damaging, my response had been fueled by decades of unaddressed resentment. By confronting these feelings directly, I found myself unburdened in unexpected ways. My business continued to thrive in the months that followed, but my perspective on success shifted subtly. The validation I had always sought through financial achievements and family recognition seemed less critical now. Instead, I found greater satisfaction in the authentic connections I was building, both within my family and beyond it. As for the main property, we eventually reached an unusual arrangement. Neither fully mine nor fully Amanda's, it became a shared asset with clear agreements about usage and financial responsibility. This compromise satisfied neither of us completely, which somehow made it the perfect resolution, a physical manifestation of our new understanding that perfect victories were neither possible nor desirable in family relationships. The most valuable lesson from this experience was not about revenge or vindication, though both played their part in the journey. It was about the freedom that comes from breaking lifelong patterns, from refusing to participate in competitions that serve no one. Success, I discovered, is not measured by comparison to others, especially not family members. It is found in creating a life authentic to your own values, regardless of how that life might be perceived. Amanda and I will never have the easy, uncomplicated relationship that some siblings enjoy. There are too many years of established patterns, too many ingrained responses. But we have found something perhaps more valuable, an honest relationship based on clear boundaries and mutual respect, where competition has been replaced by a more nuanced understanding of our differences and similarities. The last time we spoke, Amanda said something that suggested she too had found value in our conflict and resolution. "I always thought winning meant someone else had to lose," she told me. "Maybe we both needed to lose something to gain something better." That insight stays with me as I continue to navigate family dynamics and personal growth. Sometimes, the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge but reconstruction, building something new from the broken pieces of what came before. Have you ever had a family member betray your trust or use your vulnerability against you? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating complicated family relationships. Remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge is not getting even, but getting free. Thank you for listening, and may your own family journeys lead to healing, however complicated the path might be.